Well, I see that we have 22 people. We're
Wait a
little
second.
room, and you are going to see as we add people that
I'm on a speech.
Who's talking?
Well, my wife just told me dinner's on the table, but I told her.
Okay. Well, it's always lovely if your wife has dinner on the table. Yeah, it's everything's on the table tonight. So we have 24 participants, and so any of us can, of course, mute whenever we need to, if we need to hutch you or whatever. But the main thing I want you guys all to think about is in the more area of your Zoom controls. Everyone can reach over there and turn on show subtitles. It's a fun thing to do because now you can see, have an extra chance to see what the person's been saying, because, you know, these days AI helps us interpret every dang thing that is said on a talk like this. And it's going to be very helpful, of course, to people with disabilities, we hope, as well. So as we start this program, our February program for 2022, we are going to point out that we have a man with a pipe in the audience, but he is not going to be in the audience long. Nolan Bushnell is the founder of Atari, and he, many people say, has really created the gaming industry, and he's created many companies. He made what was arguably one of the very first, if not the first, incubator, by the way, which created a lot of companies all by itself. And he also started Chuck E. Cheese. Without going into that too much more, I want to just start by telling you that we are the Bay Area Computer Human Interface Special Interest Group. We're part of this Association for Computing Machinery, and we're delighted if any of you want to join for $20 a year annually. We do seem to be just barely losing money as we go forward, but we have enough money to last a while, so don't worry about that too much. We try to create user interface community, monthly meetings. We have a newsletter. We have a job bank. We have a birds of a feather, for example. Edwin, who's in this meeting, runs one about thinking where people get together once a month and talk about careers. I am interested in starting a new birds of a feather meeting. Anytime that somebody wants to help me do it, I've got a couple of ideas. And I want to just say that we welcome volunteers of any sort. I call them Bay Area BayCHI creators to join us on the first Thursday of the month in what we call the steering committee. That's people start by talking about what they're doing, but then we talk about how to run this organization. And one thing that's going to come up at some point very soon is June. And in June, we'll have a chance to get rid of the current old fogies like me, see no hair and everything, and replace us with new vice president, treasurer, whatever we want to do. But there's many opportunities for helping this organization, working on the videos, working on many things. So just get a hold of us, and we will go to baychi.org, and you'll find out more about that. Okay, so without further ado, I just really want to well, first of all, these are some of the things that you can do that are examples of ways that you can work with the BayCHI. And we've just recently started updating the consultants list in that people can post themselves what how much they would consult for and what they would do and why you would work with them in a list of a few hundred people that we've put together on our site as well. Okay, so I guess I was saying without further ado, so I better go on to point out that I've known Nolan. not when I worked at Atari Research. I was at Atari Research in '84, but I met him after that. And I had this lovely experience getting to know him and writing a little bit about him for ACM Computer, and getting to learn that even though he lived in a mansion, the place that he did spent all of his time was a basement with a ceiling that you could barely stand in, full of gigantic amounts of papers, books, and every other kind of dertitis possible. And when he went upstairs, of course, the 6 children running around, and Chopin's his own personal piano was in evidence. But Nolan is a person with a lot of imagination, as you'll learn tonight, and a lot of dreams that he wants to make come true, and has made many come true. So Nolan, without any further ado, tell us what is user experience, and how has it changed? How has it come into your life?
Well, I think that the user interface world was always very important to me, because what I learned in the very dawning of the coin-operated computer game business, Pong, computer space, what have you, that the user interface was extremely important, because in the coin-op business, there's no instruction manuals. People have to be able to intuit how to play the game literally in the first 10, 15 seconds of play. And so it was very important that the user interface be intuitive and gave the right information at the right time, and was directly linked into the game. And then I started to play with other controllers, and like a touchscreen is really good at a scalar, at a point. You touch and you see a point. Not very good at a vector, and very, very, very poor at a vector with velocity. And so that user interface is much better with the trackball. And then you have a joystick where you can get a vector, kinda, but generally not velocity. So all of these things turned out to be trade-offs. Pong, if you don't play it with a knob, is not that much fun. So there hasn't been a good Pong clone on a cell phone, because it's basically, the wrong user interface. I think that as you design, you always want to get simplicity to the extent that you can. And that's been kind of my my touchstone as I develop things. Doing work right now in the education space, in the NFT space, and dealing with educational software. And the objective is to create games that teach, so that you get the addictiveness of a video game. You get players into the flow state, and then you get the ability to teach them something. And our early attempts at that are yielding incredible results. I think we're actually going to build schools that can teach 10 times faster with significantly better retention. I'd like to make the bold claim that we will create games that will teach you everything that you learned in high school in 6 months. So we think we can truncate 4 years of inefficient school into 6 months of very efficient game playing. And then the question becomes one of, okay, if you can complete your high school in 6 months, what do you do with the other, 3.5 years? And the answer is I think you learn skills that are more relevant. I think you learn entrepreneurship. I think you learn user interface design. You learn things that it's very clear that the games or the jobs that will be available to someone who's a 6-year-old right now, many of the jobs that will be available haven't been invented yet. And that the gig economy is going to be the way to bring people into that fold and make sure that they are productive and capable citizens. I think I was just asked, have I read The Diamond Age? Absolutely, and loved it. You know, it was, some people say that it was actually designed by Alan Kay, the Dynabook, you know, or at least science fiction authors often invent things much before their real time. And so, yeah, I think the Diamond Age Dynabook construct was very fascinating. I'm also very interested in NFTs and cryptocurrencies right now. I'm involved with a company called Moxie, which is about to do a significant drop of a utility token that will be used to develop games, fund games. We're developing games that are play to earn, so you can actually earn money by playing games. And it's kind of a fun and wild ride. I think that what we are finding right now, that because of the coronavirus and so much of the world going to the Zoom Play, Google Meets, what have you, that we're actually living in the metaverse very much right now, and that the metaverse is a real thing. And it's going to get fleshed out, and there's a lot more fascinating things that come, because for me, I feel like this world, I have gotten very much more efficient than I had previously. I mean, before I was probably on an airplane 20 times, 30 times a year. And I don't need to do that anymore. And yet I feel like I'm able to accomplish most of the things and that I wish to, and it's nice. I'm curious, in terms of feedback, what are the sorts of things that are sort of revolutionary in the user interface world right now that you guys talk about? I'd like to be a little bit of a student of you for a while, for a minute. Do you have any things that are kind of revolutionary? I mean, you know, you're Ted, you did the touch point for the IBM PCs.
Well, now we are in a situation where my eyes are gazing can be stably and correctly interpreted. Where my, you know, what my, if you get it, go look at Whoop. Whoop knows if I slept well last night and whether my temperature is a little warmer today, and encourages me to take a little easy on my exercise. That's where we are today. Where do we want to be? I think we want to be helping people get back to focusing and being able to consider what they want to be doing with their time. I mean, you just told me about how you got a whole bunch of time back from yourself. I think that, you know, my raps always considerate systems are systems that are going to be respectful of you and help you achieve your goals. So that's where I always go with what I want sensors to do.
Well, one of the things that I'd love to do in terms of a user interface problem is I would like to hack my Peloton. And I know that the software that they're using is essentially a Android, and that what I'd like to be able to do is there's good feedback as to how fast I'm pedaling and how hard it is that I'm pedaling. I would love to be able to do it in such a way that we have little controls on the handlebars so that I can actually play a game. And when I'm being chased by the bad guys, I have to pedal faster and harder. And that the gamification of exercise is something that I think still needs to be done. There have been a few attempts, but nothing really good or exciting. So if somebody wants to hack the Peloton, I'd love to find out how we can do that, and maybe there's a business. I mean, Peloton should do that and offer it as a extra paid option. I mean, if I were running the company, I'd sure as hell do it. Because the exercise world is boring, and having, girls in spandex yelling at you is not my idea of a good time.
Yeah, well, there you go. I think that back at Atari, I saw very early on motion platforms with exercises put together. And where did they go? And how do we dance together? I mean, if you take a look at something like Murder Ball, where there's this very, very intense connection between the people playing the game.
Just Dance on the Kinect, on the Xbox Kinect, or the thing. If you really want to liven up a party, just put Just Dance on after everybody's had 2 or 3 cocktails, and the party just devolves into hilarity. I don't know. Are you acquainted with that game? What it is, it's you have the Kinect, which gives motion capture feedback, so that several of the songs have 4 people that have to mimic the dancers on the screen. And of course, they're always behind or wrong or what have you, and you get scored on how well you've been able to do the dance. So I highly, highly recommend it as a party prop.
So Ted and Nolan, I wanted to point out that some people have had their hands raised, and we've got some comments in the chat, and I'd be happy to share those with you.
Please do.
Great.
So Akil, maybe you'll come off mute and talk about your graduate work. I saw your hand raised earlier.
For a minute.
Yeah, I definitely can. Hi, everyone. My name's Akil. So you brought up how user interfaces are going to be expanded, or what design work. And I'm a graduate student at San Jose State University. And a lot of my graduate work focuses on specifically user interface design and gamification in training. And I'm really interested in training cybersecurity professionals and those who do really minute, really focused tasks. And I believe that what you said is completely accurate with Peloton as it is to training. If you've ever sat through work training, it's boring as heck. So I think that the next step of user interface design and any training of some sort is really trying to gamify it to ultimately make it fun and make it really retain your information and ultimately make you a better employee, but also have a blast.
Sure.
It's a really interesting space.
Yeah. The example?
I can give plenty, but currently, the TSA is currently working on training their employees only in certain big airports, but they're essentially training and focusing their employees on doing signal detection tasks, which is something comes to the scanner and it doesn't fit, so you should take it out. And every time it comes through that program and they click on it with the mouse, they get a score, and then whoever scores the highest at the end gets a gift card or something. And there's cool graphics, cool simulation on the training itself. So it's still in the early stages, but it's really interesting that someone brought that up. And I think that's where a lot of the future of user interface design is heading, at least in my opinion. But cool.
Right. And then can we get 1 or 2 more responses to what's new in interface? And then we'll go back to the talk. That's okay. So Mitch.
Yeah.
Mitch Yowitz, why don't you go ahead and then we'll be back to you, Brandel. Okay?
Sure.
Mitch, you want to come off mute? Are you
Yeah,
still-
I thought I was just throwing it into the comments. Yeah, I think starting to see things like LiDAR starting to show up as kind of default tech in phones and tablets, allowing for more accurate, precise environment awareness and tracking opens up all kinds of possibilities for interaction between devices and your environment. So I think
Well,
that's
you know,
kind of
I can comment on LiDAR. I'm on the board of a self-driving software company. And one of the issues that you have in these sensors is, I guess you guys are all techie, so I'll geek out a little bit. But what you really want to do is have as many sensors widely spaced as you can. And one of the problems that the Tesla has, they made a mistake. They got rid of the high sensor, and they really need to have something that's higher in order to give good images of things that are cross traffic. They don't have that now, and that's kind of a problem. So I believe that 30% of the cars on the road will be self-driving, and this will be class 5 self-driving in 8 years, maybe 10. And but in order to do that, right now, LiDAR and the sensors increase the cost of a car by almost $30,000. With quantity, it'll get down to 10, but it's still a $10,000 adder. What a lot of people don't realize is that once you have self-driving cars, you'll save more than that in the life of the car in insurance, because all of a sudden fender benders go away, and that's the biggest claim on insurance. So the user interface, I guess, in some ways, the sensors on self-driving cars, it's a user interface for the car, but probably not for the driver. So I'm not sure it's appropriate here. Anyway, I'm geeking out a little bit.
Cool. Kevin Mark mentioned self-driving trucks, and Kevin Burry mentioned smart contact lenses.
Love smart contact lenses. Love it. You know, if you want to have a fun geek out, I don't remember whether it's Netflix or Amazon, but there's a series called Memories of Hambra. It's a science fiction story. I think it's about 10 episodes. And it's about augmented reality, AR, smart contact lenses, and gameplay in the real world. Of course, the tech goes bad and there's bad things that happen, but it makes a good story. So if you want to geek out on augmented reality, just go find Memories of Hambra. It's a Korean subtitled, series.
Cool. Brandel wanted to comment here about VR HMDs.
Sure, and
you
but
wanna say something?
Nancy, I also want to make sure that Nolan gets to get into a rift at some point.
Sure. So Brandel's been waiting a long time, so let him shout out and then we'll go ahead.
Sure. So the sensor fusion that you mentioned, Nolan, as it relates to self-driving cars is also relevant in the home. Having a combination of multiple sensors being able to fuse input either from TVs or a general environment, or an increased number of sensors on a head. And I just mentioned that Oculus Quest and other devices are offering enough sensing capability to be able to do full body tracking if you're standing near a mirror. And I think those are some pretty interesting sort of opportunities because they actually have user-facing implications.
Yeah, I think that technology is very, very good. I was working with virtual reality, and maybe you know, but I'm actually looking for a system where I want to put people on zip lines in a virtual reality environment so that you're zip lining from the top of the Eiffel Tower to École Militaire, or across the Grand Canyon, or over Niagara Falls. Now, when you're on a zip line, you don't necessarily have the clues that you would like to have. And so I was wondering if there was some kind of a tracking system. I have a feeling it has to be RF, and with 2 or 3 maybe antennas to triangulate the position. Because all I need is position, really. I think that the headset will give me phi, rho, and theta.
It's definitely the case that that RF tracking is available for that kind of thing. If you want a large enough space, you can actually have optical trackers over a reasonable space. If you need to have them at a full scale of a zip line, then the scope of the way that you're going to track that is going to be different. But if somebody's in a truly virtual environment, then you don't necessarily need to have the full inertial consequences of traveling the full distance, because we don't have a good sense of exactly how fast we're going, just that we're going. So you may actually be able to do it with a cut down space as well. It'd be interesting to know the levels of tolerance. So there was an organization called The Void, and they used redirected walking, the process of tricking somebody to believe that they were walking straight when they were turning. So in terms of the tolerances there, if you're not talking to Jeremy Balanson at the Virtual Human Interaction Lab at Stanford, then that would be a really great place to start. But it's a really, really interesting work, and I'd love to hear more about what you're doing with it.
Cool, that'd be fun. Well, I feel like there's a lot of fun games that we can do outdoors, and you know, with virtual reality, all you need is delta V, and that adds a lot. And like you say, we're very we're not good at magnitude of delta V, and so the whole idea of having a small electric go-kart and put you in VR, I think we can simulate that you're in a full Mario Kart kind of environment in a relatively small area, because you've got the delta V's that you're creating with the electric car, and you just amplify it in your virtual environment. And I think that'll be really fun to do. But thanks for your feedback. Appreciate that.
We could go on with more comments, but I think we should go back to your main focus for tonight.
Well, I'm actually not sure what my main focus is. So,
So Nolan, there's a question about education that came up a couple of minutes ago. That was who wanted Sarash?
Hotmig Seropian, right?
Yeah.
And she asks about games that teach, specifically games that teach a language.
We've done a test with with Spanish language vocabulary, and we tested it on on 2 classrooms in a Philadelphia high school, and 2 of the Spanish 1 classes did not use our software. 2 of the classes did. When it came to Spanish 2 the following year, they could not mix the 2 classes. They had the kids that used our software had a working vocabulary of over 2,100 words. Kids who didn't use our software had a working vocabulary of less than 150. And so language training is really in the bullseye of adaptive practice. And adaptive practice is really how you disguise learning and games together. So when you're using one of our softwares, you have to respond every 3 to 5 seconds. It's the response that is good. Passive is not good training, not good for learning. It's the response, because that says you've had to consider. And, remember in college when you'd go through your textbook and you say, oh, I know that page, I know that page, and know that. You really weren't getting it positively. When you interact, when you think and have to respond, is this correct? Is this incorrect? That is the learning moment. There's also a lot of interesting work that was done by a professor of the University of Chicago he was Hungarian. He had a totally unpronounceable name. And I'm going to try, though. His name is Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. And he did a lot of work on the flow state. And the flow state is one of the things that makes video games attractive and addictive. And the flow state is you need to be challenged right up to the edge of your capability, but not more than. More than, you're frustrated. Less than, that you're bored. But if you can keep that challenge right on that knife edge of flow, which games do, because as you get good at games, we make it harder. And so that we always keep you in a challenged mode. And that's really, really important for good gameplay.
Nolan, what do you think about why Pokemon Go was a flash in the pan instead of taking over the world and being the way we look at every space, every place we go all the time?
It was not a game. The game was not fun. It was challenging, and collecting is interesting, but it really didn't have a game metric. And so once you kind of been there, said it, done it, there was no challenge other than just finding and going to a place. And that's insufficient to create a long-term addictive construct.
So just kind of, do you want to go with that just a little bit further? What would have to be added? What's an example of something that really has something more than just points going up and up and up that gives you that gives that game feeling?
I think it would have been fun if you got something and an associate or somebody in your environment could challenge you and try to take it away. Conflict is a good game construct. And so maybe you just create this thing where you are gaining things, but you also have a ability to lose things and to be challenged and get better at something and
maybe help someone else also, right?
Yeah, exactly. Cooperation, so that you get a group of your buddies and you become the baddest guys on the block.
So we have Brandon talking about active versus passive.
I was going to chime in with Christiana's comment from a couple minutes ago. What were some of the bad UX design fails that you've seen in your life?
Oh, yeah.
Good question. Wow. We did a game that was called Pool Shark. And it was a video representation of a game of pool. And the game was virtually unplayable. And a lot of people don't realize that when you start out, you never start out thinking you're going to create a really crappy game. But the minute you get it programmed up and working, you identify it immediately as a really bad idea. And our pool game was absolutely god awful, and it was one where we spent a lot of money designing it and working on it, and it earned no money, zero.
But the reason it wasn't playable was, it probably felt like a pool table, right? And what was, and it just had no direction, no rudder.
It turns out that pool, by its nature, is a game of very, very tight angles, and it's a minutia game. If you really look at it, I mean, the difference in the angles as the ball's careen is really, really difficult. And so we could not figure out a user interface that could give you that feeling of precision that is necessary for the game.
Those fine distinctions, you couldn't make those fine distinctions in aiming.
Precisely.
Yeah.
There's a lot of really great questions coming over the transom here. This game's focused on children and learning coding. I recently talked to a graduate student that told me that kids can plan cannot plan in the physical space at 2, but they can plan in the social space. So I would love to make a language in the social space for young children to learn from. Anyway, what do you think about youth, about teaching programming for children?
I was just about 6 months ago, I was asked to judge a series of games that have been programmed in Unity by 8 and 10-year-olds. And they were amazingly good. Amazingly good. And I really, I think that programming is going to be a core skill for a lot of people. Not everybody, but I really like to bribe my kids, and my kids all knew that I'd give them $100 back when $100 was a lot of money, as soon as they could type at 50 words a minute. And as a result, they all learned how to type at 50 words a minute really quickly, because there were a lot of, online courses and software that would teach that. And every one of them has said, Dad, that was the most important thing that you had me learn, because it changed the way they used, software and computers, and they weren't in the hunt and peck world.
So why has edutainment had such an awful life? I mean, we thought it was going to take over. Every parent would rather spend money on first-person shooters than on edutainment programs. What's the deal?
Most of the edutainment software were written by educators, and they failed at creating a game that was fun. I mean, I've been asked to judge edutainment things for 20 years, and they're just all god awful. They're just horrible. And I think that there is a particular mindset that game designers have that is absent in the population as a whole. Like I would have really good engineers that had no game sense. And I think that game sense is something that you get from playing a lot of games. But then when push comes to shove, that the tyranny of the blank paper, where you're inventing, you either say that you want this to be in your face educational, or do you want it to be kind of slipped in on the side? And slipped in on the side is kind of better. Like, I personally think that Minecraft is a very good educational program. I think it teaches a lot of things, but it's subtle about it, and that's a good thing.
Or SimCity.
SimCity, precisely. And when you were talking a little bit about emotional learning, there's a guy down here in Los Angeles called Mark Gulitson. He's done a couple of TED Talks, and we're working with him to create some things about mental health and resilience. Right now, we have a lot of kids that are not robust. They're not tested. They're not challenged. They're not hardened life skills, and I think that in order to be an entrepreneur, you have to believe that you can be successful. If you don't believe you can be successful, you don't ever start. And so this weakness, this fragility that a lot of kids are having, helicopter moms, and having their life planned for them 24/7, I think is really toxic. And we're working on some things to see if we can't get some of these parents to lighten up a little bit.
You mean the checklist isn't the end all?
No, it's actually toxic. I mean, I used to give my 3 or 4-year-olds hot glue guns, and my wife would say, "They're going to burn themselves." Yeah, and then they're going to learn not to burn themselves. And because if you want to teach synthesis, hot glue is the best thing you can, because you can stick anything to anything.
Right. So with games, I mean, there's the question, edutainment. I don't know, even the mixed reality games that Magic Leap put together, they're terrible, just awful. Right?
Just awful.
And not for lack of money.
Well, no, there's a theory that I have. Too much money actually dooms a project, because all of a sudden there's no feedback for efficacy. It gets swallowed in bureaucracy, because the last thing you want are a whole bunch of people passing judgment, because incompetent people will find themselves in management positions and they think that it's cool to say no. And so Magic Leap failed because they raised too much money. They had too good a demo, and the reality was different. And I've talked to several people who worked there, and they said it was a political nightmare.
Yeah, I worked there.
Oh,
It was a political nightmare.
It was a political nightmare. Okay.
I mean, yeah, it was, yeah. And no one, yeah. And yeah, there's lots to say about it. But basically, no one really understood. There was no such thing. No one understood what vision was. They really dreamt. They knew what a dream was. So can you tell us a little bit about the difference between somebody walking into your office with a little bit of a dream and somebody really having an idea of what can be solved and how to solve it?
Yeah, I think, I told you the story about the guy who came in through my law firm, and he was all ready to, got a non-disclosure, and we spent half a day trying to get things. So, and I said, "Okay, what's your project?" He said, "Baseball." And I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "Well, you guys know how to program, but you really need to make a baseball game." And I almost threw him out the window because, that's not a project. That's just, when you hear people say, "That person stole my idea," it's not true. you were too lazy to do anything about it. Anybody can have an idea. It's not having an idea. That's anybody who's had a shower has had an idea. And anybody who's had a shower has had a good idea. But it's what you do when you get out of the shower, dry off, and start working on it. And then you have to walk up what I call the mountain of reality. First thing you do, you write it down. Second of all, you name it. Third of all, you get the URL. Fourth, you start trying to figure out what the cost could be. What are the steps to implement? How much would you pay for it? There's this idea of a hollow company where you don't build the product, you just build the sell sheet. And you see if you can get a customer. And you price it and you do that. And if you can get a customer, then all of a sudden, maybe this is worth building. But starting with building the product before you've tried to sell the product is a waste of time.
So with Chuck E. Cheese, on the other hand, you took a very different direction than Disney did with his animatronic entertainment. And you had very specific reasons for it, but it certainly wasn't just a whim. You thought it through probably pretty carefully to make something that elaborate. Is there where did you get your intuitions? What were you trying to achieve? How did that one all fit together?
Well, I knew, I think that my prime objective was to create an arcade for kids. That was really the prime objective. Pizza was there to remind people to come as a family. There were and there's still very few venues where young kids and parents can go and have a night out. But I also knew that the kids were going to be having fun in the game room and the parents may not. And so the animal show was actually more focused for entertaining the adults than it was for the kids. The kids were out and about. So when we designed the animals, we had 2 or 3 characteristics. One, a restaurant is a hostile environment for anything electronic. It just is. And so we knew we had to have a great deal of redundancy and robustness. That's why we used pneumatics. Disney used hydraulics. Now, pneumatics has the problem that the pressure to motion is not linear. You have to apply air pressure and it gets moving and then it goes really fast. And so it didn't give us the quality of animation that the Disney things had. But hydraulic fluid is really nasty stuff that you don't want to have in a restaurant. So we knew that we were going to have to do that. So we tried to make the animals in such a way that they could be a little bit herky-jerky and it didn't matter. And they did, and we did, and it worked. And
well, it's kind of a cartoon, playful thing that it comes off as, right?
Precisely.
Yeah. So there's I think that there's something. I mean, I'm trying to get inside of what is a whole idea, right? A la Nolan. And somebody asked, what's the metaverse game going to be like? I'm not sure that's. Well, we'll see if you have anything to say about that. But that's we've been that's the drain we've been circling for the last few years with Magic Leap and all these other and Facebook and Microsoft's HoloLens and shit like that.
Well, the metaverse is going to be constantly evolving and changing. And in some ways, it's going to resemble Second Life, and, like Was that revolutionary? Kinda. But the real issue with the metaverse is ownership of IP and the nature of the blockchain. Some people call it Web 3.0. And Web 3.0 is really enabled by the blockchain and the ability to own and have transactions around your creations. NFTs are just one instance of that. You know, the tokens that we're going to be using for the metaverse are going to allow you entrance into an arcade in the metaverse. Now, you're going to be able to be there, but if you don't have the right tokens in your wallet, you're going to be barred. You're not going to be allowed to do that. So in some ways, an NFT can be considered a ticket. It can be considered a story. It can be considered artwork, and it can be considered real estate. And so it is really a way of dealing with nouns. You know, sometimes it's proper nouns, sometimes it's not. But then once you have the right nouns, you can then deal with things that have some verbs associated with them.
Well, I mean, there's this gorgeous stuff. You know, if you take a Facebook VR system or a Magic Leap, they've got all the colors, they've got no pixelation, they've got resolution beyond description. They match. They'll put a badge on your chest. They'll have a little robot jumping around you, and it's all something you can stand to play with for 3 minutes.
Yeah, yeah. You know, this is actually kind of an interesting topic, because the world is constantly changing, and a lot of times what we want is essence and not necessarily gewgaws. For example, whenever you play chess, there are wonderful chess sets that are hand-blown, glass and carved ivory and all that. But if you're playing a tournament game, you play with black and white wood pieces because you want the essence. You don't want the ambiguity of a knight or a bishop that maybe looks a little bit like a pawn. You don't want to have that ambiguity. And so I think as we look at the world of graphical user interfaces and what it means, how good it needs to be, the jury is still out. Here's the question. What is the Turing test for VR? What is the test that says, I can't tell whether I'm in VR or whether I'm in base reality? And I think that right now, visually, we're probably at 95%, passing the Turing test. Audio, we're at 100%. I can absolutely fool you to think you're in a phone booth or a cathedral. Smell, we're at 100% there too, at least with most of the smells. There's probably some weird ones that with volatile esters that won't get there. But what will break the Turing test, I think, in a VR will be food. Because there you have haptics, you have smell, you have taste. And I think that if I ever have the question, am I in base reality or am I in VR? If I have something to eat, I will know.
I mean, the thing I wonder is, I'm not sure that perfect fidelity is going to be an advantage. I think if I am disoriented because it is 100% passing the Turing test, does that make it a better or worse thing? And that's back to your chess pieces. Quite frankly, the gameplay is the point. And right now, right now they've got a problem where if you put on mixed reality glasses and you try to take an airplane and fly it off of a runway, and it shows you the corridor that you're supposed to go on with, the dangers are all over to the side, and something runs across the runway, it turns out people ignore it and they run into it. So it's actually disorienting to have these orienting structured visuals that are supposed to help you find your way off the tarmac. So I think it's a very complicated question of what is the illusion we are creating and why, and when, and how do we keep people, again, able to focus on what they're doing and why they're doing that, and be able to succeed at having an experience that they value.
I'm sure this group is well aware of the fact that our eyes are really not seeing anything. They're seeing points, and what we perceive is all a construct that's being built in our brain. Our vision isn't what we think it is at all, and that's kind of the basis of illusions and magic tricks and what have you. But and I'm sure that once we try to deal with these things in the virtual reality and augmented reality world, that those constructs are going to fail just because our eyes are not built that way, and that what we're seeing isn't what we're actually seeing.
Yeah, but what we're going to experience, hopefully, is going to be educational and entertaining, and we are going to not do something stupid and kill ourselves because we are pretending to be someplace that we can't possibly be.
Well, like with anything new, some of us will kill ourselves.
Sorry, I want to recognize somebody who's had their hand up for a long time, although you might not have seen it because you've been talking to each other, and that's good. Suyash, do you want to say something? I hope that your comment is still relevant.
Sure, yeah. I think one of my questions somebody asked, but I do have another question. This is more in general, lessons of like entrepreneurship or game. I'm very interested in games and educational games as well. But I see so much competition in games. You take out your phone, look in the App Store or Steam, any place like that. How does one stand out, especially if you don't have a big budget, to make a successful game? Like recently, there is this game, Wordle, got very popular, and the guy, just one person who made this game. So that's inspiring, but sometimes you look at like people invest like years and millions of dollars and games don't become successful. So what's any advice or tips on that? Be appreciated.
Boy, you've just articulated the conundrum. I mean, there are so many games, and there's a lot of really good games that are just invisible, and right now there are things that have been exciting because they've changed the economic model more than revolutionary games, but they have a different, how many people thought, 10 years ago that you could make money on giving games away free and then have in-game purchases? That was a big deal. And so I asked myself that same question, and I don't think I'm going to be much help to you because I think it's really hard. And, like Wordle, lightning strikes.
But I actually really enjoyed something you said to me a few years ago when you were making UWink. and you were trying to make these games for people that were in a restaurant. And what your insight that you told me is that it was better if they were dramatic but didn't last very long. And because that gave them a chance to let the other person show them something else.
Yeah.
And you know what you told me is you wanted quantity games. You didn't want quality games, and you wanted short games. Do you want to say anything about that experience?
There's a game class that I call trinkets, and trinkets are games that are kind of like junk food. You can play them, you can learn them fast, but they're not very fulfilling. You know, and those are the kind of games that are really good on your cell phone when you're on the subway or waiting at the bus stop. You know, you kind of you don't want to have to really invest a huge amount of time or effort. You just kind of want to have a fun little thing to it. The thing that I love about games is the diversity of them. I mean, they're just all over the map, and there's so much different things. I mean, the games that you play on your cell phone are different than the games you play on your Xbox, different than the games that you play on a tablet even. Like, Minecraft is really good on a tablet. It's really crappy on a cell phone. You know, and then there's Chromebooks. Chromebooks are really good because they're cheap and they don't crash, and you know, you don't need a systems administrator. So it's becoming the go-to piece of hardware for schools now, and they're cheap, and you know, mind-bogglingly cheap, and it's, I mean, remember Negroponte with his $100 laptop?
Yes.
He got it. You know, I just saw some Chromebooks for $100, and I said, geez, you know, that didn't take long.
So this idea of casual games, Stacy Ricardo brings up, and I think that that's kind of related to this idea. And what I really think also, you were talking, you know, we were talking about in the restaurant, but now that we are spending all of our time hanging around in bars by ourselves while we wait for our friends, or walking while we're playing we're walking our dog and we're playing a game. The games, I think the gameplay might be again different because of the place we're in, as well as the different device we're on. Do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah. My partner and I developed a game 2 years ago, which won the CES Innovation of the Year award, and it's called Saint Noir. It's not a video game. It's a game that was played using Amazon Echo. And so one of the things that, think of a board game as being a different kind of structure. It's where you are elbow to elbow with other players. And because you're not focused on the screen, you can focus on each other. And so I believe that a social game using smart speakers, the AI from smart speakers, Saint Noir is a murder mystery game. And what you're doing is you are using your voice to interview suspects. And the suspects have to tell the truth. The perp can lie. And so the game is about figuring out who's lying, who's telling the truth, to catch the guy. And it's a lot of fun. And we've got 2 or 3 other games that we want to do one of these days. We've got them all packed out. And we really got into learning how to program the Echo ecosystem And I'm actually right now doing a design. Have you guys done escape rooms? Well, imagine I'm going to do some escape rooms in which we have an Echo there, or a Google Home. And so that now you are asking questions. And there's another benefit there. Escape rooms are fun if you're winning. They're really not fun if you're lost. And so by having Echo there sort of moderating what's going on, we can tell if you're behind in time, and we can give you a hint automatically. And so my escape rooms are going to be a little different. And you know, now the Echo ecosystem with lights and all the other things you can do, it's really, really fun. And then you link up some Arduino and a little bit of, I still like to play with pneumatics. Hook up some pneumatics to the Echo, and all of a sudden you can really mess with your environment.
So one question that came up earlier that we hadn't got to was the value of haptics in interface. And I really believe, I mean, people cannot type on a keyboard that does not give them touch feedback very fast at all. So do you want to say something about physicality?
Yeah, I like haptics. There was a very interesting thing that I experienced, wow, probably 30 years ago. And it was a sort of think of it as a concave mannequin, meaning that you could actually move up and you didn't have to put it on, you just had to lean against it. And you were in VR, leaning against this, and it had these little percussion things so that if you got shot, it'd go boom and give you a little bit of a tap. Great fun. It was really good. And then it went away. I don't know where it is. There's another haptic thing that I saw at a SIGGRAPH in which you actually held onto a cylinder, and it had vibrations in such a way that it could create the image in your brain of these objects. It's the damnedest thing I ever did. I never did figure out how they were doing it, but I kept going back until they wouldn't let me do it anymore.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot you can do with a little bit of haptics too. And, you know, I remember us rocking a pole position arcade game at Atari back and forth, and it feeling completely different just with a physical person doing it. And, there was a lovely demo in 1989 at SIGGRAPH where they had you hanging 2 inches off the ground while you put on some VR glasses and pulled on 2 strings to control your parachute. And in using that to teach people, they were able to reduce the number of injuries in training people to parachute by 10 times.
Oh, I can believe that. Yeah.
And, literally those 2 strings, it's just two, I mean, it's literally 2 optical encoders and that's it.
We should do that. My son has a micro amusement park called 2-Bit Circus. I don't know if you've heard of it.
I've heard you talk about it.
And it is incredible. And we create a lot of games that are bespoke for that location. And in fact, my escape rooms are going to go in there. And, I'm actually a really lucky guy. I have 8 kids and 5 boys and 3 girls. But all my boys are in some kind of a game construct. And so when we go into 2-Bit Circus, 1/3 of the games that are on the floor were designed by my kids. So now, am I proud? Yes.
pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So 2-Bit Circus, we can look it up online and learn more about it.
Yeah, and come down when you're in LA. It's in the Arts District of downtown LA. It's great fun.
I'll come down sometime. We are coming up on, it's 8:40, but that does not mean we have to stop. What it means is there's a general question from Christina Garay.
Garay. Mhm.
Do you wanna-
Yes, perfect.
Hi there.
Hi, so I mostly have a general question. I'm currently in school studying user interface and user experience design and barely starting out in the field. Do you possibly have any tips for a person starting in user experience and user interface design?
I think that being good at something is important if you become intuitive. You got to feel things, and I think that if you're going to be a good designer, just do a lot of designing and be willing. I generally don't like focus groups, but when it comes to things like design, I do. And what you want to do is see where people struggle when they're, and you want newbies, virgins that have never done this before. Is it intuitive to them? And what you want to be able to do is always focus on the person that you think is the dumbest person in the room. You got to win them over, because a lot of times in an environment of fun, a person's IQ drops by as much as 30 points. Add alcohol, it drops another 3, another 10 points. So they're basically blithering idiots in a bar or a restaurant. So you've got to really focus on having something that's fun for a blithering idiot. And I don't mean to be disrespectful, but that's just the reality. Alcohol and dope plus fun equals stupidity every time.
Also, what also is stupidity is when you feel like you're on the spot. And the thing about the focus, the question of letting somebody stupid try something, the stupidest person, is you don't necessarily want to prime them. You want them to act, you want to present it as though they would have the experience that they would have had if they had no support around them and they were in that awful place with that loud music and the people that they can't meet and and they just got off work and their boss yelled at them and all of that.
Yeah. I was being very disrespectful to my customers.
Okay, I bet we have another interesting question about the history or future of Nolan's projects and ways of thinking about creating things. Any, please, maybe, yeah. Who would like to go next? And we'll just do this a couple more times and then we'll start closing down.
I can definitely ask a question. It's Akil, by the way. Turn on my camera back again. Hi, everyone. I'm back. So Nolan, this question is kind of specific to you in the realms that you play in. Specifically, what realm? Because let's just like cut it to the chase that it is that gaming is now the space that I would arguably say you're a founder of. The space is massive now. There's so much innovation going on, whether it's now not just video games as an industry itself, but education, training that I mentioned, so many other spaces. Do you see any pitfalls within the user experience because it's becoming so vast, or do you think that's only good for growth? Like there's no downside to it?
Well, Do I believe that there are going to be some really crappy experiences developed? Yes. It's just the nature of the world. What I'm always looking for is something like, I don't like to do things that I've done before. I like to be inventive. I mean, that's why I had so much fun doing the Echo thing. You know, no video, no nothing. How do you create this environment where everybody's having a good time? And so, you know, can we take people to a place just through sound? You know, when you're interviewing the cocktail waitress, do you need to hear the glasses and the jukebox playing? When you're when you're interviewing the sheriff, you want to have people in the holding cell giving him a bad time. You know, it's a matter of creating this other thing. One of the things I'm working on right now is this idea of, and it's called Weird Woods. Think of it as a campground, glamp ground, you know, where you have a tent with a toilet and a shower and you know, linens on the bed. So it's a camping experience, but it's not. It's
Roughing it. It's not roughing it.
It's not roughing it. Now let's add games. Let's add experiences. And so one of the things we're doing is we're going to have escape trails, not escape rooms, escape trail, because now we can do that out in the woods. Now we have zip lines with virtual reality. What about Mole Meadow, where now you have a meadow that we have life-size moles that pop up, and you have to run around with a sledgehammer and beat them down. What about having a laser tag arena or a gauntlet where, as you move along, bad guys pop up and you have to shoot them with your laser gun? The whole idea of, can we turn a campground into a micro amusement park? And that's kind of a project that I'm currently hatching, and I've got it up to about 20 games. We'll probably test and wheedle it down to 8 to 10. But I think that, have any of you been to a Great Wolf Lodge? Great Wolf Lodge has a very interesting niche. It's basically an hour away from two city centers. Like there's one that's about an hour from Seattle and an hour from Portland. So it's sort of halfway in between, an hour and a half. And they have games in a water park. And it's for a micro vacation. Parents with kids, they would like to go out for, you know, they don't want to spend a huge amount of money, but they'll spend a little bit to have a hotel room. And these hotel rooms in the Great Wolf is, you know, there's one that has tents and bunk beds that look like they're in the tent, and it's really fun. And in a water park. Well, I believe we can do the same thing with a glamp ground. But a glamp tent costs $20,000. The typical hotel room of the budget hotel has a capex of $300,000, and you can rent them for more money. You know, the glamp ground that I went to last summer, we paid $300 a night for a damn tent. It was a nice tent, but it was, you know, when you think about it, it's compared to the $90 for Best Western. It was really, it's really an interesting environment. So I think there's an opportunity there. And campgrounds right now, particularly with COVID, are right now, if you want to buy a campground that's operational, you have to pay 5 times revenue. That's stupid. Revenue, not earnings, 5 times revenue. It's because it's a stable cash flow. Anyway.
So this this idea, well, one person asked about books. Are there any books that you think people should consider reading that besides the one you wrote 2 or 3 years ago?
Well, I've got 2 books coming out this year. I've got one that's called Exodexa, School of the Future, which is sort of the manifesto of my education company. And in fact, look up Exodexa online and you'll see my education company. And my science fiction book is finally going to come out. The COVID, staying at home, I decided I was going to get some of my half-done projects off my plate. And so I think in April, May, Video Games 2071, which is my science fiction book. It's all about nano architecture and haptics and virtual reality and the games. And I said Video Games 2071 because it's a 100-year anniversary of the video game. And so I thought that would be kind of fun. But I like Neil Stephenson. I've read almost everything that he's done. I love, my absolute favorite, though, is the Hyperion series from Dan Simmons. It's a 4-book series, and it is a thick read, and it is mind-boggling. I recommended this to a bunch of people, and I'd say half of the people I've recommended it to can't get through it. It's a thick read, but it's a wonderful story. Love it. I've also kind of enjoyed, there's a Chinese author who did the 3-body problem and ball lightning. I can't say his name. It's Kix and Lee or something like that. And the thing I like about it, it's very, very different thinking. And then, of course, there's Lee Child's the Jack Reacher series. It's not science fiction, but it's great trashy novels.
We have a hand raised from Ricardo, Stacy. Ricardo, you want to speak up?
Yeah, sorry, I don't have my webcam plugged in, so you can't see me. But I just wanted to ask, because you've mentioned about technology in education. I want to know your thoughts about technology and therapy, for example, psychotherapy. So let's say maybe somebody has a, fear of heights. Maybe you could use VR to put them in a simulation where they get exposed to heights, and then maybe you graduate that to the real world. Do you think that has, any viable application?
I think that all these things are possible and to be determined. I do know that we're working on a game right now that we think can give kids a little more robustness. What we want to do is stress them a little bit and let them get through it. I was talking, Mark, if you want to look up Mark Goliskson, he's got several TED Talks, smart guy. He's a clinical psychiatrist. And we're working to try to make kids, particularly high school girls, have a very, very high suicide rate. And to see if we can't make them feel better and not take things so seriously. If you don't get a date to the prom, your life does not end. And yes, boyfriends are shits. You got to realize that very early on. There's actually very, very good studies that have shown that girls that have brothers are much happier, more happily married, because girls kind of understand early on that men are very different. And so I think the more that we can give these lifestyle questions vent, we can create more psychologically robust individuals.
Well, I think that this is really been a fascinating hour and a half here, and as we're and it's really, I mean, it's been a remarkable forum. I didn't quite, we didn't quite know how we were going to go, and it's been going great. And I think that the point now is for us to thank you, Nolan, for all that you've been doing and all that you're going to do, and for sharing, giving us a chance to see a little bit into some of those projects and the way you think about them. And it really is quite inspiring. And I hope a lot of people take away this idea that you really do have to dive in and really get great at what you're doing, and just really take seriously being honest about whether or not it can be somebody other than you can enjoy whatever you've built. And I think that was, for me, a very special statement you made about the, what you used the word focus group, but I think it was a lot about that the 60 IQ points that we lose when we're not all geared up for what we're doing. So with that, Nolan, I know that you, before this meeting started, I know you were being told that dinner was warm and on the table. And I'm really sorry.
Well, that's okay. I eat cold food all the time.
but I just want to apologize deeply
No
for
problem.
making that be true this evening for you.
Well, see, that's actually my wife's problem, because she has access to my calendar, and I had this on the calendar. So she just wasn't paying attention.
Right. And so I think that's none of us are paying attention.
Well, it's all nice to meet you all, and I wish you luck in your life, and just do everything with enthusiasm. Just be enthusiastic, and then be happy. And we live in amazing times right now. And when I think about how easy it is to program things now compared to back in the days, I actually knew machine language at one time. Talk about a worthless skill.
On that level, when you were the fact is that artists have typically spent the last 500 years playing with oil paint, and then they started stacking up televisions 30 years ago, but they didn't really know how to get inside them. It really took Nolan to get inside them. And I think that the point is that in terms of this running out of runway for good videos, good games, the technologies are enabling us more and more fancier and fancier paintbrushes. And if we understand that paint, that technology deeply, that's when we can use our creativity and our artistry to do something fabulous. And I think that's part of the deal.
I want to leave you with something that I do. I think that you can often get surprising results by mashing dissimilar things together. So, for example, when tectonic plates collide, that's where all the earthquakes and volcanoes exist. Now, what happens when you collide a car and a computer? Is that a self-driving car? Is it a car that does interesting things? What happens when you mesh a Amazon Echo with a board game? What do you come up with? These are new venues because you're basically pushing together dissimilar things that haven't been done before. So take something from column A, mash it with column B, and just think about it. And a lot of times you can find some really interesting threads there. And with that, I will say adieu.
Thanks for the mashup.
Be good. Bye now.
Good night. And with that, we will end the program for tonight. And in June, we will have a chance, as I was saying earlier, to choose new leadership. But in the meantime, we will have programs every second Tuesday of the month, as we have for many, many, many years. So good night, all.